Hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space, and a couple more Halloween cards for this year's series. If anyone has missed any of my Halloween cards so far this year, I will have a link to that playlist at the end of this video. And today's video is using some more of the Pretty Pink Posh August 2023 release. As of me filming this intro, what I used, most if not all of what I used, is available. It's been super popular. Things have sold out. Everyone's working on restocking, so just stay tuned. You know, things will come back in stock ASAP. But yeah, today's video is actually part of, or like my post, cards, whatever. I'm part of an Instagram hop. So I will have a link to my Instagram in the description below the video. It's always there, but I'll bump it to the top because if you hop on over to Instagram, I'll have links to the other makers that are participating today. There's giveaways and inspiration and all that fun stuff. So I will have that link below along with my blog post where I'll have the picture links to the supplies and the info, etc. So you can check that out below if you're interested. And yeah, keep watching and I will show you guys how I made these cards. The main focus of these cards is the Boo to You stamp set that you can see there on screen and the coordinating wafer die set. And I started with the main pumpkin image. Pretty Pink Posh has a bunch of sets like this that it's like a cluster of a bunch of little images, either in a shape or they make words, that sort of a thing. And this one is little Halloween images in the shape of a pumpkin. So I took some smooth white cardstock, I put it in my mini MISTI, used my anti-static powder tool, and I am stamping this with clear embossing ink. And then I'm going to coat it with detail white embossing powder. I'm going to do this twice because while I've got all the supplies out, why not make more than one? And it's not going to look like much, but I'm going to heat emboss both of these. So they're just white on white right now. And then I will die cut them with the coordinating shaped wafer die. And then I'll set them aside and I will come back to these later on in the video. But I wanted to get them stamped, heat embossed, die cut, and then set aside. So I just taped the coordinating wafer die into place using just a little bit of washi tape. And again, repeated the process on the second panel. So once I've got those die cut and out of the way, I'm going to use the leftover cardstock from those panels, put them back in my MISTI, and I'm going to stamp all the little individual images from the set. So I'm just going to line them up on the cardstock, and these I'm going to ink up and stamp with Simon Says Stamps Intense Black ink, just a alcohol marker friendly ink, and inking everything up, stamping them a couple times because they're brand new stamps. So, and again, repeating the process on the second panel. So I've got all these little icons stamped out and ready to go. So once these are stamped, I am going to color these in with my Copic markers. And very simple coloring. I've super sped this up in editing. It still didn't take that long to color these, but yeah, simple. Just simple. Doing my typical darkest to lightest because that's just what I do when I color with alcohol markers. And yeah, started with the yellows and then worked my way into I had yellows, oranges, grays, and that was about it. And then I bring in some brown for the stems of the pumpkins. So my go-to color combo as well for oranges, although I went a little bit later this time and I brought in YR02 as my latest. Just cause. Just something different. So worked my way around with all of these little images, colored everything in. For the web and the little ghost, I used very, very light grays like C1, yeah, C1, and then I'll use C00. It's subtle, but it gives that little bit of, you know, shading for, I'm using air quotes that you guys can't see, but plain images, you know, ghosts, webs, etc. So did that for those ones, and for the little tip on that little candy corn image. And then for the bats and that cat, I used very dark grays. So C9, and then I'll use C7 and C5. Just so I've got, that depth, but it doesn't completely obscure absolutely everything, especially on that little cat face. You don't want to completely cover that up with really dark markers, because then you won't see his little detail, and his little face is adorable. So after I was done coloring those, then I grabbed a couple of browns for the stems on both those pumpkins. So just E27, E25 I did with those ones. And then my final little step was, of course, to use my Jelly Roll white gel pen and just dots and highlights wherever I thought they'd look cute. I added little dots to the little spider image and the little bats to give them little eyes, because again, why not? Why not? So dots, highlights, wherever I thought they would go. No light source whatsoever, because I don't even know exactly where I'm going to place these on the card yet. I just wanted them colored, highlighted, all the cute things. And then after I was done coloring, I used all the little coordinating wafer dies to die cut these. And for this first panel, got them all lined up, again, using washi tape to hold the wafer dies into place so they don't shift when I run this through my die cut machine. And after I die cut the first panel, I was not going to move all these over onto the second one, especially when everything was already lined up. So I just took the scrap piece after popping out all the die cuts, lined it up on top of that second piece, because everything was stamped the same, so everything lines up. And then I just taped those pieces of cardstock together, made sure everything was lined up, and then ran that through my die cut machine. Simple, I'm just, anything to save time with some of the fiddly bits, So I ran that through, and it die cut all of those images a second time, and then I just set them in my little Simon Says Stamp triangle trays to hold those in place while I worked on all the other elements of the card. So now that the main images are basically done, I want to work on my the blending on these pumpkins, which is going to be quick and easy, and then I'll work on my backgrounds. So like I said, white heat embossing on white cardstock looks boring, but the white heat embossing is going to resist the ink. And I'm using 3 shades of Simon Says Stamp's Positively Saturated inks. I used Peachy, Grapefruit, and Mandarin, starting with the lightest, working my way to the darkest, and just using a blending brush and just quickly blending this over. And the white heat embossing resists the ink, so then you can see all those little icons that I heat embossed. So after blending the 3 shades of orange onto these, I'll then blend a couple shades of brown onto where the stem is with just a smaller blending brush. So got that blended, and then I used Simon's Cappuccino and Mocha inks for the stem. Got that added, and then I just used my little microfiber cloth just to wipe over the heat embossing, because while it resists the ink, some ink is still sitting on top of the heat embossing. So I just use the cloth to wipe away any of that ink, and then all the images pop. Everything's good to go. I wipe off the surface of my desk from the ink that I got on there. And then I pulled out my big Waffle Flower grip mat, and I have some smoke gray cardstock. And I'm using this little stencil set that's from the new release. This is I think the Spiderweb. I think it's just called Spiderweb. I'll have a link to it like I do with everything else. And line that up. And I'm using white pigment ink along with one of my picket fence paper pouncers, and just pouncing that ink over the stencil. So I've got these fun little webs in the white craft ink on this gray cardstock. And again, do the process on the second panel. Line up the stencil, pounce that white ink onto it. So once I've got that in place, I'll remove the stencil, remove the cardstock. I just wipe off the mat with like a baby wipe. People have been asking me with these grip mats what to use to clean them. That's photopolymer, so it's the same as like your clear stamps. So you can clean it with just the same way you clean your stamps. So I just wipe mine off. If it gets really grody with some of the, like when I'm using paste and different things, it will stain. You can see mine is staining because again, photopolymer stains, not a big deal. But if it gets really grody, I just take it to the sink and wash it with some gentle soap and water, and it's good to go. So the second layer of the stencil is the little spiders, and I used black soot distress oxide ink and my paper pouncer and pounce that over the stencil. So they're sitting on top of those little white webs, and I love it. Just love it. So did that to both of these backgrounds, and then again, just wiped off the grip mat and set that aside. And then of course I'm going to add splatter to these backgrounds because just because. So once the stenciling is done, I am going to put these backgrounds into my splat box, and I pulled out some carved pumpkin distress paint and black soot distress paint, because black soot is my like go-to for black splatter. And yeah, carved pumpkin, because I was like, why not bring in some orange, just something fun. So I've got some of the carved pumpkin distress paint. I just put it on a palette. I got my little fan brush. I did water this down a tiny little bit just to make it a little thinner and more splatterable. And then after splattering that, I did the black soot distress paint. And again, when working with distress paints, these do dry permanent, so I immediately wash out my brush. I wipe off my palette. Everything's good to go after that. So splattered the backgrounds with both of those paints and then set those aside to dry. And then while those were while the splatter and everything was drying, I pulled out some doodle twine from my stash, and I decided to wrap that around the stems of these little pumpkins. Wrap it around. I'll use my reverse tweezers to help hold the knot in place so I can tie little bows. Those leaves I die cut from some scraps of green cardstock with a die set that came out last year that I just love. This is the Fall Basket wafer die set from Pretty Pink Posh. And I just used one of the little leaf wafer dies. So I die cut a couple leaves from that, and I used the spiderweb die set that also came out last year, I think. And I die cut some vellum with that too. So, and then the other thing I did was the Boo to You sentiment is from that same Boo to You stamp set that I stamped the pumpkins and the little icons and everything. And I white heat embossed that onto black cardstock and then die cut it with the coordinating wafer die. And then the backgrounds, after they were dry, I die cut them with the largest of the Pretty Pink Posh WONKY stitched rectangles die set. I love that die set. And especially for Halloween, it's just perfect. So the webs, they were die cut from vellum. So I just used some washi tape to tape them into place, because you're not going to see this because it's going to get covered up by this big old pumpkin that I put some of Simon's Big Mama foam tape on the back of. Pop that into place. And then I did the same thing to the little die cut leaves. I just taped them together with a little bit of washi tape, stuck a little bit of foam tape on the back of them, and then popped those into place. And then all of those little icons that I had stamped and die cut, I am just going to kind of scatter throughout the card fronts with a mixture of just foam squares as well as just some craft tacky glue to adhere them into place, especially the really small ones, like the little spider, the littlest star, the little bat. Rather than fiddle with foam tape, I just glued them straight down. Saved me the effort. Everything else I popped up with little foam squares for extra dimension. And then same with the sentiment, I popped that up with some foam tape as well. And then my card bases are going to be top folding A2 white note cards. And I put them into my mini MISTI. And on the inside, I'm going to stamp that pumpkin with the lightest of the 3 orange inks. So the peachy ink. So ink that up, stamp that. I'll stamp that onto the insides of both of the cards. And then I took one of the a couple little companion sentiments in the set as well. And I took one of the stamps and lined that up onto the center of the card. And I'm going to stamp that with VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. I could have stamped it with the Black Soot Distress Oxide ink, but it's just habit to always stamp my sentiments with VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. So stamp the sentiments with that onto the inside of both of the cards. And then I'm going to adhere the card fronts to the card bases with craft tacky glue. Once those are adhered into place, I'm going to add some bling, of course. And I just pulled out the Lime Shimmer Mix from Pretty Pink Posh. These are just bright lime. confetti, just to tie in the little bits of green I had added with the little die cut leaves and the doodle twine. So once I've got the card fronts adhered, I'm gonna add some of the bling with that lime shimmer mix, and then once I'm happy with the placement, which when am I not? I just kind of stick them again. I just stick them wherever I think it's gonna look good, like fill in little areas, that sort of a thing. So get those in place, and then I'll just adhere these with little dabs of craft tacky glue, and then once these are here adhered into place, these cards are complete. So like I mentioned in the intro, I will have a link below the video to my Instagram account where the little hop is happening for today. And this is like day one of, I think there's like 3 days of little Instagram hops for this release. So I'll have a link to that in the description box below the video. I'll also, of course, have a link to my blog post. In the blog post, I'll have photos of the cards. I'll have picture links, all the supplies I used, all that good stuff. So you can check that out below. There will also, of course, be the supply list in the description box below. So it's all there if you want to check it out. And then at the end of the video, I'll link to my Halloween playlist. And yeah, thank you guys so very much for watching, for commenting, thumbs upping, subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And I'll see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.